Good day everyone, and welcome to the channel. It's Londononion here with a Back 4 Blood weapons review. And in this review, we're going to be looking at another one of the first weapons one is introduced to, the M1A sniper rifle. Now, although the stats and specs of the weapon speak for themselves, I will be giving my evaluation on this weapon's capabilities in combat. This will involve tactics that suit the weapon's strengths, my conclusive opinion, and an overall score. Now, evaluation will take place on four main fronts: ammunition economy, crowd control, mutation deterrence, and pressure combat. Before we get started though, it is important to note that a weapon's shortcomings can be supplemented with one's card selection, but evaluation will mainly be geared toward the weapon's base attributes. Additionally, one's character choice can make weapons somewhat more forgiving, meanwhile difficulty selection can accentuate or soften the downsides. So starting off with the M1's ammunition economy, which is essentially how long a weapon can practically last throughout a given level, the M1 is a semi-automatic sniper that deals high damage and has a base magazine size of 10 rounds. Because the weapon is semi-automatic, there is a decent level of control granted to the user. However, there is naturally a cap on how fast the weapon can fire, which is approximately 4 rounds per second. But it is a sniper rifle after all. Under most circumstances, it only takes a single round to eliminate a single ridden at all practical ranges. And the weapon's penetration makes killing multiple filed ridden an easy feat. The weapon's maximum effective range is 14 meters. Anywhere beyond, and the damage numbers begin to recede to a minimum of 27.5 units at 30 meters away. But even these numbers will kill ridden with a single round. When firing the M1, it has a rather sharp recoil, and attempting to maintain maximum fire rate while compensating with downward adjustment may be more wasteful than effective in my experience. This is not to say it's impossible, but likely an impractical solution. With this in mind, the M1 forces a wielder to pick their shots more carefully. Although this can be considered a disadvantage as far as ammo economy goes, this is more of an advantage. Although the M1 is a sniper, it has surprisingly reliable hipfire, and at a close enough range can merit the use of maximum fire rate. Usually, the use of automatic fire is for the purposes of crowd control, which will be our next discussion. Depending on one's corruption cards and main events in a given stage, crowd control will be more or less an important constituent in one's survival. Higher difficulties will likely create a greater need for effective crowd control. The M1 is a relatively high damage rifle, making very quick work of common ridden, and its ability to pierce and eliminate multiple targets with a single round makes it rather formidable, especially in narrow areas. Conversely, lateral moving targets will augment the difficulty, such as when attempting to defend teammates. Part of handling crowds in Back 4 Blood will involve having to adopt a run-and-gun-like style. Unfortunately, the M1's mobility is on the slow side, making offense on the run a difficult feat without sustaining significant damage. Additionally, the reload speed is no spectacle, and if anything, only takes away from the weapon's prowess in crowd control situations. Compounding this issue, the M1 only has 10 rounds at base level, which leaves minimal room for user error. The main saving grace for the M1 is its reliable hipfire, though doing so on the move is likely a bad idea. Crowd control for the M1 starts at mid to far range as a proactive measure to stave off the impending close range pressure. Alternatively, when on the move, the best strategy to employ is slower, intermittent movement to maximize accuracy and take advantage of pockets of space to progress towards, as opposed to maximum movement and minimal offensive pressure. Sometimes, the need for crowd control is due to a lack of effective pressure combat and mutation deterrence, which we will cover next. Pressure combat, as I coined the term, refers to how efficiently a weapon can eliminate targets in multiple areas, or how well a weapon can complement one's ability to engage and eliminate multiple scattered targets at varying ranges. Now, we had already discussed the M1's effective range, damage, and control. Given that it is a sniper with reliable shot-to-kill ratio, pressure combat is where this weapon can excel. Part of being effective for pressure combat is the intervals of fire one can put down. With this in mind, a slight detriment to the M1 is the reload speed, which isn't too long, but with its mag size plays to more of a disadvantage. Couple this with the sharp recoil, and the difficulties with effective pressure combat can be easily seen. The main overarching advantage, however, is that a landed shot anywhere on a ridden will eliminate them. This throws the need for headshots for killing efficiency out the window, and should minimize the potential for user error. As for mutation deterrence, I would argue that it is probably one of the more important aspects of surviving in Back 4 Blood, and I would say there are 3 main strategies weapons can fall into in addressing them. There is kiting, fighting, or a discriminate mix of the two. Kiting involves tactically retreating from an enemy to put oneself and other teammates in an advantageous position to eliminate them and also render their attacks less or completely ineffective. Fighting, in this circumstance, moreover, is geared toward holding one's ground while applying heavy fire and eliminating a given target before they can do much damage, if any at all. For the M1, as we had discussed, its maximum effective range is 14 meters, meanwhile its minimum effective range is anywhere from 30 meters and beyond. Now, in our last video where we covered the Uzi, I would consider a range below 10 meters to be the danger zone for all mutations, which is where damage is essentially guaranteed unless an effective throwable is in place. In the M1's case, given everything we have discussed, a discriminate mix of the two will probably be in the user's best interest. An interesting attribute about the M1, among certain other weapons, is that it can easily stun and knock back most mutations with a landed shot on their weak point. This is most easily achieved with all mutations except the tall boy variants, who have more difficult weak spots to reach. With that said, the M1's damage, mixed with its stumbling capabilities, gives it an important niche on a given team. Even without weak spot damage, if used correctly, the M1 is still a hard hitter, and can make relatively light work against mutations. One is better off kiting tall boys under most circumstances, in my opinion. Now, although flaws of the M1 can be easily noticed, I would still say it is generally an effective weapon, but must be used in its parameters. It is a sniper after all, and not to be mistaken as an assault rifle or used with similar tactics of an SMG. One will likely find themselves disappointed if they try to do that. As far as playstyles go, it is more fitting for a slow and more calculated player, though this is not always an advantageous way of progressing through the levels. Moving on to the scoring of this weapon, the M1's ammo economy is in the ideal range. It requires slow and controlled fire due to the jump in recoil. And although it is at the mercy of one's trigger finger, the cap to its fire rate is easily noticed, and this only serves as a healthy damper. The weapon operates as a one shot, one kill or more, which is the most any wielder could ask for. At the same time, it is very easy to get carried away and attempt to counteract the recoil, especially in faster paced circumstances, which Back 4 Blood can be notorious for, and will likely increase user error. So in that case, I give it a 4 out of 5 in ammo economy. Crowd control is where the M1 experiences the most difficulty. As discussed earlier, the recoil, demand on controlled fire, and ammo capacity is much less than ideal. A user must rely on its penetration, damage, and hipfire capabilities during crowd and run-and-gun circumstances. Alternatively, one is best performing crowd control from a distance as often as possible. So I conclude with a 2 out of 5 for crowd control. Pressure combat and mutation deterrence is another area of strength, given that it is a semi-automatic sniper with a high shot-to-kill ratio. Mutation deterrence is also not a big hurdle for the M1, though there are of course weapons much more efficient in dealing sufficient damage. Regardless, a skilled M1 user is a healthy addition to a team, so I give it a solid 7 out of 10 under those two regards. So overall, this puts the M1 at a 13 out of 20. But that concludes the review. Thank you guys for joining me on this one, and I will see you in the next review, where we'll be covering the M4 Carbine. It's been Londononion, and I'll see you guys next time.